Hey guys, welcome back to week 2 of the Watcast. We're really excited to be back together again in this space and just to get to continue this conversation on story. Last week, if you didn't get a chance to hear, Q got to share his story with us and we got to hear from him a little bit about that and about some of the things that have shaped him and made him into the person that he is. So if you haven't watched that yet, go back and check it out. That would be episode 1 that came out last week. And if you have watched that, thank you for the support already. I know that we are surprised by how many people have actually watched in the first few days.
So true.
We just want to thank you guys for that and ask that you continue to watch, continue to share, and continue to listen. And feel free to keep pulling us aside as you see us to ask more questions, to even dive deeper into some of the stories that we're sharing. So yeah, if you haven't given it a watch, go ahead back to last week and give that a watch. And Q's going to share a little bit about what we're doing today.
Absolutely. Before I get into it though, thank you guys, because we are now the number one podcast on YouTube.com with the name Watcast. So we're doing big things over here. You can check, we're number one, baby. But this week, Josh is going to be sharing his story, and I'm going to be listening to it for the first time as well. So why don't you join me in prayer and also join me in hearing about this man's journey. All right. Lord God, I thank you so much for Josh and how far you have brought him in his life, Lord God. I thank you that he is my partner in crime with this whole DA thing and also a really good friend. I pray that you will guide him and lead him as he tells his story to us today, and that it could hopefully reach out to somebody if need be. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
So I'm actually gonna share sort of like one small episode or one small arc of my story, if you will, today. So there's this like meta story that is just my entire life, and I'll give like some brief points about that and about the journey that has that I've sort of been on for the last 22 years now. But I do want to zone in on one particular episode that I feel like could be called even like the climax of my origin story, if you will. And so I think I shared last week at the end of the last episode that this story that I'm going to share with y'all today is kind of like, it's so impactful and was so drastically life-changing that if it had never happened, I never would have ended up here at PBA in the first place. But it was like so against my plans of what I had for myself. So that's just a little bit of a preview of what's to come. Let me start sort of at the beginning. I grew up in a super solid Christian family, parents that love one another dearly, that serve the Lord together and have been doing that as long as they've been together. I've got 3 siblings. I've got an older brother, Caleb, who's a web developer in Jacksonville. I've got a sister. Her name is Sarah, and she teaches English in South Korea. And then I've got a little brother named Danny, still in high school, and he's out in California with my parents right now. And yeah, we've always been just real close, super solid, super loving, super encouraging, super supportive. I don't really have anything to complain about as far as family life goes. Now we have our little nuances and glitches, if you will, that have come and gone, but as every family does. But I've been just incredibly blessed in that. I will say there's some, I mentioned last week as well that there's been some connection that I noticed between mine and Q's story of feeling sort of this disconnect between what we understood Christians were supposed to be like versus what we saw Christians be like. And so there was this disconnect for me that I know there also was with Q, with hearing all these things about what a Christian is supposed to do, what people who are following after Jesus, that are living in relationship with the Lord, what their lives are supposed to look like. And then we see people claiming to do that, and their lives just don't look like that. And in some pretty drastic ways sometimes too.
Yeah.
And so that I was hurt by is a specific context for that story. That if you want to hear more about what that looks like for me, come pull me aside. I'm more than willing to share. But I was hurt by people that were supposed to be these Christians, these leaders, these people that loved and followed after the Lord, but at the same time are just imperfect people, and are just as broken as I am, just as broken as I was. And so but at the young age that I was at, I didn't understand that. And so like that even like furthered this disconnect. And so I thought like my family was the way that they were, and my family loved me the way that they did, simply because they were family and that's how family was supposed to be. I had no idea that it was because of how much they loved the Lord, and that drew us closer together as a family. And so in high school, I met this guy named Blake, who I would probably argue was one of the first people in my life that loved me in the same way that my family did, that wasn't a part of my family. And so he loved me unconditionally. He took care of me in some just incredible ways, met some very practical needs of mine, but just was a part of my life, even though he knew my brokenness and knew my mess. And he sort of is the one that began to pull me back into understanding that, man, people are broken, people are messed up, people are hurting. And sometimes even the ones that are following the Lord and that do love the Lord, and that are just seeking to be like Jesus, sometimes they do terrible things to each other, simply because of the brokenness that exists within them. And even learning that I'm not exempt from that. I wasn't at the time, I'm still not exempt from that. I get things wrong often. But this kid Blake in high school was the one that began to help me understand that, and help me realize that man, my family is the way that they are, and I have the support and encouragement and love from them that I do. Partially because they're my family, yeah, but largely because that's how God has loved them, and that's how God has been faithful and supportive and encouraging for them and in their lives and in their walks, and in our just relationships together. And so that sort of set me on this trajectory to want to be for other people what Blake was for me. And so I started hanging out with Blake all the time. He became one of my best friends. Is one of those guys that like I can not see for 3 years and still have confidence that one day whenever I get married, he's going to be in my wedding. And so like I love the man so much. He's been just an incredible blessing on my life. And so I know that I want to do that for other people as well. And so I started seeking ways to I guess formally do that, and come alongside other high school guys like Blake did for me. And one of the ways that I found to do that was through this mission trip to Ecuador. It was a short-term mission trip, so it was like a week-long trip. It was spring break, I believe it was either the spring break of my freshman or sophomore year of high school. Man, I don't remember which one it was, but it was one of those 2 years. I want to say it was my freshman year, and I went to Ecuador spring break to get to share with other high school students in the country of Ecuador. I was in Quito that week, working with a team from the organization Crew. I don't know if you know or don't know Crew, but they're a global sort of missions organization that has different like branches of their organization. So I was working with the high school ministry of Crew, but also the global ministry of Crew, and so I was working with the high school ministry of Crew in Quito, Ecuador. And so what we did that week is we actually went into high schools and had these like miniature assemblies, I guess you could call them, where we talked about relationships, just literally like every kind of relationship you can think of. Like that was just our like big broad umbrella sort of theme, I guess, for the week, was relationships. And we always, like, in our talks, in our conversations, in our interactions with these high school students in Ecuador, would always find a way to bring it back to our own stories and our own relationships, and how our relationships with people have shaped us, how our stories have shaped our relationships with people, and how our relationship with the Lord has impacted our lives in some pretty crazy ways. And so here I am, just like not long after starting this great, incredible friendship with this guy, Blake, who helped me to just reshape my life, refocus my life, to re-understand who God was and how much he loved me and how much he cared for me and in what ways he loved me. And so I'm just like a few months into this friendship with Blake and re-understanding these sort of things. And I'm here in Ecuador sharing with high school students about impactful relationships. So often I found myself talking about Blake and about my relationship with the Lord and how my friendship with Blake impacted that and shaped that. And so this is the first time that I'm ever like sharing that sort of thing with anybody. And I remember like there was one moment where I was with these 12 high school girls, right? And none of them speak English. I'm sitting with a translator. His name was Vladdy. Super funny dude. Loved that guy to death. But we were like in the courtyard of a high school, and I'm sharing with them about Blake, about my relationship with the Lord and how Blake has affected it in some really cool ways. All this stuff, and this one girl starts crying. I believe her name was Gabby. It was like 7 years ago now, so. But I think her name was Gabby. She starts crying, and I'm sitting there going like, oh shoot, what did I do? What did I say? I have no idea like what's going on. And like all the other girls in the group are like whispering to one another and are like they're like putting their hands on Gabby. And I'm like, dang it, like I did something wrong. I messed up. What do I need to do to fix this? So I like turned to Vladdy, my translator, to be like, hey man, help me out here. Like what's going on? And he's crying. And so I'm like, what? Like what is the deal here? And then like 2 minutes into this, I'm like waiting to hear from Vladdy what's happening. Gabby's still crying. All the other girls have started crying. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? And Gabby finally spoke up, and Vladdy sort of calmed himself down and translated for me what she was saying. And he was just sharing with me that she had said that like on paper she's like the most popular girl in the school. Everybody loves her. She has all these friends in the world. But then she said, but I don't have anybody that treats me the way that Blake has treated you, that has loved me the way that Blake has loved you, that has cared for me and been there for me the way that Blake has been there for you. And she was like, man, if only I could have one person like that, I'd be willing to give up all of the rest of what I have. And Vladdy's sharing that with me, still crying. And I'm like, man, like, that's hard. Like, that's a hard place to be, a hard place to find yourself. And she then continues, and she was like, even if I don't, she asked this question. She said, even if I don't have a Blake in my life like you do, it sounds like Blake is just reflecting what this God is for you also. And she was like, is there a way I can know him? Is there a way that even though I can't know Blake, is there a way I can know this God that makes Blake the way that he is? And here I am, like, just sort of beginning to re-understand who God was and all these things. I'm like super excited in this moment, but also like terrified. Like, I have no idea what to say to this girl.
Right.
Like, yes, you can know God, but I don't really know how it works exactly. I mean, I kind of do. My parents were missionaries here stateside when I was a kid. They worked with high school students. I knew the prayer that people prayed, right? I like knew all the little things, but I didn't know like really what it meant or how it worked. And so I'm like, all right, yeah, I think there's a way that you can still know this God even though you don't have a Blake. And I was like, can I pray with you? And she was like, yeah, absolutely. And then like all the other girls started talking to each other, like bantering back and forth in Spanish, and Vladdy starts laughing and crying again at the same time. And so I turned to him and I'm like, what's going on? And he was like, Gabby's not the only one that wants you to pray with her this prayer, whatever you're gonna pray right now. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, well, they all want it. And I was like, what? All of them? And he was like, yeah, all 12 of them. And I was like, shoot, all right. And so I'm like sitting on this little like concrete wall that's about like knee high. And so I'm like sitting on the edge of it, and they're all sitting in like this circle kind of thing on the ground in their school courtyard. And so I get ready to start praying. And Gabby was like, can you hold on a minute? And I was like, sure, I guess. And so I pause and I wait, and like literally without saying any sort of words to each other, every one of them like got on their hands and knees and like put their face in the ground. And I was like, oh my word, like I've grown up in a church my entire life and have never seen this kind of reverence for the Lord, especially from a group of people who are just like hearing about him for the first time. Like this is incredible. I was super challenged and convicted by it, but I was like, man, like this is so cool. This is so sweet to see that. That's a respect for the Lord that I want to have and that I want to emulate. And so I start praying this prayer. I don't really know, like I don't really remember what I was saying or what I was praying, but I knew that my heart was intentional. I had faith that their hearts were intentional, and so I prayed that even though they may not have a Blake in their life, that the Lord would be that for them, and that he would show up for them in those ways. And if he was already doing that in their lives, as I trust he probably was, that they would be aware of the ways that he was moving in those ways. And so I remember like finishing praying that prayer. You know how you feel when you're like super dehydrated and you like stand up too quick and like you can't see anything, you're kind of like, you feel like you're about to fall over. Sometimes you even do like need to sit back down really quick.
Yeah, it's
but it's
worst.
Like a super quick headache and everything is blurry. So I could have been dehydrated, but I don't remember being dehydrated any of the rest of the time that week.
It's probably because you were dehydrated.
Fact. But I stood up from saying that prayer off of this little concrete wall, and I had sort of that feeling of like it's almost like a daze even of like, and like, what is going on with me, right? I stood up from that moment and had that feeling, and just the most clear. I couldn't tell you whether I heard it audibly or not. I don't think I did, but I wouldn't doubt the fact that I could have. And it was so clear to me that it could have been audible.
Yeah.
But I know without any sort of doubt in my life that when I stood up from that moment, the Lord was saying to me that this is what I was going to be doing for the rest of my life. That the job that he had set before me, the work that he had been calling me to, was to share him with others. And that was just like super surreal. The rest of that week in Ecuador was just really, really cool. I got back from the trip and I ran from that call as fast as I possibly could. I wanted nothing to do with it. I like had my eyes set on like going to school in Australia for international business and law. Right, like I had these big plans, big dreams, and he like quickly turned that around. I went to a conference that next summer where he kind of slapped me in the face and was like, "No, I told you what you're gonna do." I was like, "Okay, I'm sorry." So then for the next like the rest of high school, I looked for ways to do that. I looked for opportunities to just share Christ with people, and so that looked like me in student leadership at my church. I've had a handful of opportunities to preach in my church when I was in high school, and to on like Sunday mornings, as well as in like youth services. I got to lead at some different camps. I got involved at crew at my high school and was on the leadership team there, as well as at a couple other high schools in Orlando, and just had so much fun just doing what I knew the Lord was asking of me, and sort of just continued in that way. And so I knew that like, okay, ministry is kind of this word that people throw around when they talk about like feeling like they're supposed to do this kind of thing that I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. And so I was like, I'm going to pursue ministry. And I didn't really know what that looks like. But I found out you could actually go to school for ministry. And so I was like, that makes sense. And my dad at the time was an operations director for the Orlando campus of Asbury Theological Seminary. And so Asbury University in Wilmore, Kentucky, there's one stoplight in the entire town of Wilmore, Kentucky, and it's a 20-minute drive of horse ranches before the next any sort of anything in Kentucky. In every direction. Like this town is the middle of nowhere. There's one store. It's called the General Store, and I think I remember there was a Subway. I would have hated this place. I enjoy slow pace, and I enjoy small and quiet, but I can't do one stop sign and one general store. Like,
there's not a whole lot of people that can.
That's just a lot, especially in the middle of Kentucky. Like, that's just, I grew up in Orlando, Florida. Like, that's just wild to me that I ever even was considering this. But I was, because they were offering me a full ride scholarship to come and study ministry. But then my dad lost his job, and they sort of took that away. And so I'm in this space of like, well, now what do I do? That was my plan. Around the same time, I started to hear about this thing called the World Race from all kinds of different people, different things. It just sort of randomly kept popping up all the time. And it's a program that happens through an organization called Adventures in Missions. And typically you have to be 21 years old, and it's an 11-month mission program that you leave the country for 11 months and you go to a different country every month. And so it's the trip is called the 11 and 11 gap year, or not gap year, the 11 and 11 world race. I did what's called the world race gap year, which is made for students right out of high school. And instead of 11 months, it's 9 months long, and it's not always just 1 month for one country. Like it's kind of random. It depends on the route you take. But I heard about this. I knew I had just like lost this full ride to go to school for ministry, and so I was like, I don't really know what to do right now, so I'll pursue this. This sounds like a really cool opportunity to sort of see the world and continue to do what the Lord has asked me to do, to just share Him with people. And so I saw an opportunity there to be had. And so I got signed up, went through the application process, went through the interview process, was accepted for this, and it was absolutely incredible. I was on a route that we went through Qatar, Lesotho, Swaziland, which is actually no longer called Swaziland. I think it's Eswatini now, but at the time that I was there, it was called Swaziland still. South Africa, India, Nepal, and then the last two quick stops. The last two places we were going were Nicaragua and Guatemala. I could talk about the world race for literally hours. I have just an infinite number of stories that I could share. And if you ever just want to hear some stories about the race, come pull me aside. And I would just be more than happy to talk about the race with y'all, and to share about that experience. But I want to sort of hone in on one story from the race that happened when I was in Nepal. And so Nepal was one of the later countries that we were going to, so we were pretty far along in the race, in the program. And I was living my best life. Like, things were just absolutely incredible. God was moving in just amazing ways. I was so sure of where I was, so sure of what I was doing. Like, there was no doubts I was where I was supposed to be. I was with the people I was supposed to be with. Like, this is what I was supposed to be doing in this season of life. There was no doubt in my mind about that. But when you apply, and when you are interviewed, and when you go through the process of being accepted for the race, you sign a contract that has all these sort of stipulations for you. And really this contract, it does a couple things. It challenges you as a racer, as what they call ourselves, as world racers. It challenges you to be someone who lives above reproach, but it also is there to maintain relationships that have been built with ministries in other countries and other cultures. And so it's there to challenge us in our own lives, but also to help the world race, to help Adventures in Missions maintain ministry relationships in other countries. And one of these stipulations on this contract is to not get drunk, right? To make a long story short, I got real drunk at a pub in Nepal. One night I was out with a group, and I was the only one who drank, but no one else really cared that I was doing it. It was just a thing that happened. I could tell you a million reasons why I think it might have happened, and I'd be willing to share that part of the story with you if you're interested. But got really drunk this night, which is actually the first time I've ever been drunk in my life, and so was kind of just like, I didn't really ever have an issue with drinking. In like late middle school, early high school, I had some problems with some other things, but drinking was never really one of them. So this was like a weird thing for me to have been doing at all. But yeah, I got real drunk at this pub in Nepal. The next morning, our squad leaders and squad mentor sort of like gathered us all and were like, hey, we heard that there might have been a group of y'all that went out last night, that went out drinking, and we want to give you guys a chance to come forward and be people of integrity and share that. So I was super convicted, and so I came to them. It was just an incredibly hard conversation for multiple reasons. First reason is my squad leaders and my squad mentor were my best friends on the world race. Like, they were the people that I had grown closest to out of everybody. And I was going into this conversation knowing that I was going to be sent home because I had broke a contract. And so like that was just devastatingly hard to be in a place that you know without any sort of doubt that you're supposed to be with people that you know that you're supposed to be with, and to be doing a work that you know you're supposed to be doing, and to blow it kind of sucks, and to be told that you have to leave that space. But I went and I had this conversation with them. I found out later that it wasn't even me and the group that I was with that they had found out about. So that's kind of frustrating. Not that it would have changed whether or not I went and told them, but it just is like a funny little thing that is like, man, that sucks. They didn't even know about me. But still, I shared with them. Really hard conversation. My squad was actually leaving. They were leaving the city that I was in that like Friday morning. I believe this was a Wednesday night, and they were leaving the country on Friday morning. The city on Friday morning to go to a different city to where they were going to be doing ministry next. But the airport to the international airport was in this city. And they couldn't get me a flight till late Friday night. So my entire World Race squad was leaving Friday morning, and I was going to be essentially just in this city in Nepal by myself for an entire day before I went to the airport that Friday night. But I was told that, hey, yeah, you're going home. Like, this is a reality, and it sucks, and it was awful. But I had been working through reading the book of John, in my own devotional time, my own time with the Lord. I'd been working through the book of John, and I was right around John 20 around this time, right? And so the next morning, so this conversation happened on a Wednesday night. This Thursday morning, No, that's wrong. It was that Wednesday night after that conversation. I went back to my room. It's already late. It's probably midnight or so. I went back to my room this Wednesday night and was continuing reading in John. And the story that I had read was after Jesus comes back to life, and he's eating breakfast on the beach with his disciples, which I think is just such a fun thing. Like, Jesus just died and came back to life, and one of the first things he wants to do is go have breakfast on the beach. I think that's just such a cool thing, cool story. But he pulls Peter aside. Peter, who had just, before he died, denied even knowing him. He had denied Christ 3 times in one night. And so he pulls Peter aside, and he says, "Peter, do you love me?" And what I imagine, Peter being shocked that he's even asking this question, is "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus says, "Then feed my sheep." And then he says again, Peter, do you love me? And again, shocked by the question, I imagine Peter's like, yes, Lord, you know I love you. And so Jesus is like, then tend to the flocks, tend to my flocks. And then a third time, Jesus says, Peter, do you love me? And the third time, the same response. Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And so again, Jesus says, then feed my sheep. It's that simple. If you love me, then feed my sheep. And so I'm reflecting on just like what has happened in my life, and like the fact that I was being sent home from a place that I knew I was supposed to be with, people I was supposed to be with, doing work that I was supposed to be doing. Because of a mistake that I made, I was being sent away from that. And just completely feeling like I had failed the Lord in every way, and that he was just so utterly disappointed in me, right? And so I'm reflecting on this story the next day, and I like, in ministry, you always hear about people experiencing these moral failures, is what they've been like coined, I guess. I don't really like that phrase. I think everybody has moral failures, but for some reason in ministry, it's I don't know, it's just different. It shouldn't be, but it is. And so these moral failures, you always hear about people in ministry going through them, and what they always feel like they're supposed to do, or are always told that they're supposed to do when they have these moral failures, is to take a step back from ministry for a while, and to just not be doing ministry for a certain amount of time, right? And here I am, like having just had one of these moral failures, but in my heart, in my like innermost being, I knew that I wasn't supposed to just stop doing what I was doing. I wasn't supposed to just stop living into this call on my life that the Lord had given me, which was to let other people know that he's there. And so I'm reflecting on this story, and it's just sort of permeating in the back of my mind and my heart. And so I go to take a walk. It's probably now 2 a.m. Mom, if you ever see this, I don't know that I ever told you this part. I'm sorry. I went walking alone in the middle of the night in another country, but I did, and God did cool stuff. So I'm walking in this town called Tumnell, and this town is known, again, sorry Mom, it's known for violent street crime. It's known for prostitution. It's known for all these like horrible things. I'm walking around reflecting on this text, and I run into this guy that I had prayed for earlier this week. I had met him. He was one of the little shop owners, and so I just started up a conversation with him again, and like 5 minutes into this conversation, I hear like screaming, right? Not like bloody murder kind of screaming, but like angry screaming. And so I like look down the street, and sure enough, here comes this dude, probably in his 40s, 50s, but this like fit looking dude, like sprinting at us. And I'm like, oh crap, what is about to happen? And so he tackles the guy that I'm talking to. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, this is crazy. What is happening? And so this guy is like yelling at this dude on the ground. He's like starts kicking him and whatnot. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, what do? I have no idea what's happening. So he's still yelling. So I start yelling, trying to like not yell in anger, but yell just to be heard. And so I like am trying to calm this guy down. I like kind of step in between him and the guy that he's kicking on the floor. And I'm like, hey man, what is going on? What is the deal? Like, what has this guy done to you? Like, what is happening? Um, and he was like, you can't be listening to this guy. You can't be talking to this guy at all. He's a scammer. He always comes in whenever white people come into town and are Christians and are telling the people about this God. He always tries to get them to give him his money, and he scams them, right? And he's just going off, using a lot more creative language than I just did, but and still just yelling his brains out. And so I'm like, I mean, I've shared with him, I've prayed with him, I've gotten to know him a little bit this last week, and like I haven't seen that, but man, even if that is who this guy is, even if that's what he does, like, who am I to stop praying for him? Who am I to stop seeking him and to stop being friends with him? Like, sure, maybe I won't give him money, but I still love the guy. Like, it's still my job to show Christ to him. And so this guy is like still yelling. I calm him down after a little bit. The guy who was on the floor made sure he was okay. He got up and he left in anger and frustration, understandably. But I like sit down on the curb with this guy that had just kicked the snot out of this dude. I asked him his name. His name was Sanju Baba. And just like was talking to him a little bit, and he asked me, he was like, "Why are you here?" And I was like, "Man, what do you mean, why am I here?" I'm here to love people like this, to love people like this man that you just attacked. And then I was like, and I'm here to love you, dude. Like, I didn't say this, but in my head I'm like, clearly you need it just as much as he did. So I'm here to love people, and I'm here to point them to the Lord. And he was telling me all this like story. I shared a little bit of my story with him, and he like got super vulnerable, like super quick, and he went into like sharing his whole story with me, which was absolutely crazy. If you want to hear about this guy's story, please come talk to me. It's a fascinating story. Essentially, he had like become this person that like went on this weird, I'll save it. If you're interested, come talk to me. He ran away from Nepal as a kid to Mumbai, India, and lived on the streets of Mumbai for a long time. Came back. Crazy stories. If you're interested, please come talk to me. I'd love to share Sanju's story with you. But when he came back to Nepal, to Tamil, he got married to this girl, and they had 2 daughters, right? And so their daughters, I think he said they were about, at the time, were about 15 or 16 years old, around that age, like mid-teenage years. And his wife, like, he fell into a deep alcohol addiction, and his wife kicked him out of the house. And so he's had sort of been living on the streets since. His wife, but like they stayed together, but his wife didn't want him around the kids, and so she kicked him out of the house. So he's living on the streets. Meanwhile, his wife loses the home, and the daughters end up on the streets as well. And he, at the time that I was talking to him, had no idea like where his 2 daughters were. But his wife had moved into a smaller place, and he and her had like started to rekindle their relationship. They had another baby girl, just 2 months before I was there talking to him, he had another daughter named Shina. And he's like starts telling me about Shina, and he's just like weeping at this point. And I'm like, man, this dude, like I watched this dude attack a man an hour ago, and now he's sitting on the side of the road just like in tears, weeping like a child. And so I'm like, man, there's some deep just hurt and brokenness here. Like, what's going on? And he was telling me that my daughter has this like insanely high fever, and it's just the flu. Like, there's medication for it, but we can't afford it. We can't afford to get our daughter taken care of, and without it, doctors say she'll be dead in 3 weeks, right? And I'm like, holy crap, like what do I do with this? Sort of a fun little interjection here, actually. I had just gotten my dreads done this day in Nepal. So for those of you who have been around PBA for a year at least or more, you would know that I used to have a full head of dreadlocks, and this was the day that I had first dreaded them in Nepal, and I expected it to cost me all kinds of money, and so I had a bunch of cash taken out for it, and it ended up being super cheap. So I had all this like extra cash in my pocket. And so I like, as he's saying this, like, we can't afford this, I'm like still have in my head, well, he just told me this guy's scamming people, like maybe that's what he's doing. But still, like, I remember reaching into my pocket and just sort of like, without trying to let him see how much money I've got in my pocket, right, I sort of was trying to like count some and take it out and to give it to him. And I remember just in my heart the Lord being like, what are you doing? You don't need that. You don't need any of that. And in my little like, well, I don't want him to go use it on drugs kind of mentality, the Lord was like, who cares? He has a need, and you have a way to meet the need. Whether he uses it for his need or not, that's between me and him, not you. So I was like, all right, God, you're right. I don't need this money. He clearly does need it more than I do. So I took the wad out that I had, and I handed it to him. Didn't say anything. I just kind of handed it to him, and he started crying. And by this point, I can't help myself. I started crying. And the night just continued. He continued to share stories with me, continued to share his story with me. And he was like, you remind me of someone. I was like, all right. You're like, all right, Sanju, who do I remind you of? He was like, there was this girl about 6 months ago, and her name was Chloe. She was about your age, and she came from South Africa. She came from South Africa on a trip like you're doing. And she told me, is the first person that told me about who Jesus was. And I was like, oh yeah, tell me about that. So he goes and tells me about this girl Chloe who came and told him about Jesus, and like helped him just give his life to the Lord. Which made me laugh, because then I thought to what happened an hour, 2 hours ago now, when he just like attacked this man on the street. And so I asked him, I was like, man, if that's where you're at right now, then what's going on? What was tonight about? And he was like, man, I've just been trying to clean up these streets ever since it happened 6 months ago, ever since Chloe shared with me. And me and my wife, we went and got baptized at like an Irish church nearby. And I was like, that's kind of funny. Why is there an Irish church? Seems super random.
Yeah, right. No problem.
But he was like, yeah, I've just been trying to clean up these streets. And I was like, man, there's a different way to do that than what you were doing tonight. and he was like, I don't know what it is. I was like, look at this time that we've had, you and I. Feels pretty significant to me, don't you think? And he was like, yeah, I guess so. And I was like, man, just love people, right? And so we go on, we go our separate ways that night. I prayed for him, and I'm like, man, what a cool and encouraging story, to have been reflecting on this passage from John, where Jesus says, look, Peter, if you love me, then go feed my sheep. After me just feeling like a failure, feeling like I've lost my chance to be doing what the Lord has called me to do, but knowing that I need to continue to do it, but not sure like whether or not people are going to be okay with me doing it, if people are going to tell me, no, you need to step back, you need to step away, right? And then here on my walk, literally reflecting on this passage of scripture, on this story, God puts this man Sanju Baba in my life to give me an opportunity to just get to share with him, to get to do exactly what the Lord had called me to do, to get to do exactly what I knew I was supposed to be doing. And it happened after I had just messed up. And so that was so encouraging for me. I came back the next morning and I shared with my squad leaders, and they were like, man, you need to share that story with your squad. They were like, your squad has been feeling really down that you're having to leave. You're seen as a leader here. You're someone that your squad looks up to, and so this has been probably harder on them than it has on you. And so this would be an encouragement to them, in the same way that it has been to you. So I was like, all right. So I shared that story that night. It was a really cool time with me and my squad. And then the next morning, they all leave the city. So it's just me left, and I have until like 8 o'clock that night before I have to be at the airport. So I'm like, what am I gonna do all day? So I'm walking around the town. I decide on a whim to go and get a tattoo. I've got a tattoo here down my side, that I went and got in Nepal that day that I had nothing else to do. Went to this little shop called Mohan's Tattoo. Super sweet. The guy did like an incredible job. Only charged me $30. It was incredible. But walking back from getting this tattoo, I've still got quite a bit of time, but I'm walking back to sort of like get the rest of my things ready, get packed, and sort of process some more of this like going home. And I see this huge crowd of white people, right? And I think to myself, this is unusual. All the white people in this country just left the city. So like, what's going on here? This seems a little bit weird. And so I like trying to figure out like what was going on. I walk up to this crowd of people, and sure enough, at the center of this huge crowd of people, I see Sanju Baba sitting there. And I'm like, what is he doing with this group of people? And so I walk up to him, and he's like, hey, Josh, come here. And so I come here, and he's like, there's someone I want you to meet. And he turns around to this little tiny Nepali woman behind him, and he like taps her on the shoulder, and she turns around, and she's holding what looks like this newborn baby, and is like, Josh, I need you to meet Shina. I want you to meet my baby girl. And so he takes the baby, he takes his daughter from who was his wife, and he handed her to me, and he said, we went right after I stopped talking with you the other night, and went straight to the hospital, got the medication we need. It's been a day and a half, and she's already doing perfect. She's already doing well. And just what a sweet moment that was, to get to not only, like I said, experience like, man, even after this failure of mine, the Lord is saying, no, you're going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep giving you opportunities to do this. But then literally a day later, getting the chance to see fruit in it, which just I feel so blessed to have gotten that chance, because there are people who do ministry their whole lives and sometimes don't see the fruit. And so getting to see, like, of this one story, just to get to hold this baby girl in my hands, and know that the Lord still had me where he wanted me. And so that was just such a cool opportunity. And it gets better. He goes on, he's like, actually, there's someone else you need to meet. And he yells the name Chloe, right? And I'm like, Chloe, where do I know that name? I just heard someone tell me about a girl named Chloe. And sure enough, this little white girl comes out of the crowd. And he's like, Chloe, meet Josh. Josh shared with me more stories about this Jesus that you told me about, and he saved my baby girl. And Chloe starts crying, and I'm like, shoot, like, this seems like a pretty big deal. Like, this is really cool for me too, but I don't know if I'd be crying right now. And so I asked Sanju, I was like, hey, like, what's going on? And he was like, well, I was the first person she ever told about Jesus. I was the first person she ever shared with. And one thing that she prayed with me, that she shared with me, that she was scared to pray because she still had doubts of her own. But one thing that she prayed with me is that she trusted that God was going to send someone to restore my family. And Chloe then chimes in, and she's like, Josh, thank you so much for being an answer to that prayer. She was like, I've wondered every day for the last 6 months if anybody would ever show up. And so again, just being in the midst of failure, getting to still do what I knew and know still to this day that the Lord has placed on my heart to do, was just such a gift, such a blessing. And I began to experience and understand grace in a whole new way. That story with Peter and Jesus became a story of me and Jesus, where Jesus said, Josh, do you love me? Yes, God, you know I love you. Then feed my sheep. Josh, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Then tend to my flocks. Josh, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Then the things you did don't matter. I want you to feed my sheep because you love me. And because I love you, and because there's many sheep out there like you that need the same love. And so letting that be my mission to come from this story. And so I ended up going home. I got home, was super encouraged by this story, by this experience. I had already worked and processed emotionally, the fact that I was having to leave that space and come home, and tried to find areas and opportunities for ministry, and wanted to also be honest about what had just happened in my life. And for about a month and a half, I tried to open 5 or 6 different doors, and just was told no by every one of them. Was told that I needed to step away, was told that I needed to take time to figure myself out, until this man named Damien came along. And I'll wrap this up with this, just to see how just incredible God is at being able to redeem our mistakes and to redeem things that could have destroyed us, into just incredible opportunities. This guy Damien was a local youth pastor, and I knew him before I left for the race, but didn't have a super solid relationship with him, just didn't know him super well. But he was the first person to say yes to me, first person to say, I want you on my team, first person to say, I'm willing to put in the work to work alongside you. And one of the things that's so special about that is Damien graduated with a bachelor's in ministry from Palm Beach Atlantic University. And I immediately knew what I wanted, where I wanted to be, what I wanted to do. And it was to come and to learn from the people that he learned from. Because in saying yes to me, I quickly gained more respect for that man in ministry than I had for anybody else doing the work, and wanted to learn from the people that he got that from. And so it brought me here, led me to where I'm at now, led me to just incredible friendships, incredible people, incredible opportunities to continue doing ministry, continue learning ministry. If I wasn't here, never would have met the just most incredible girl in the world. It's just such a funny little thing to think about. If I didn't get super drunk at a pub in Nepal, I wouldn't have gotten kicked off, I wouldn't have come to PBA, and I wouldn't have met her. And the Lord wouldn't be working in the same ways that he's working now. And do I think I was supposed to get drunk at a pub in Nepal? Absolutely not. But I think my God is so much bigger than a change of plans.
Yeah.
If there's anything that I've learned from this story is, man, God can use broken people because everybody's broken. And so if he can't use broken people, then the world's in trouble. But he can, and he does. And he invites us into that space, and he's okay with our brokenness. And we don't have to take care of it because he's going to do it, and he's going to make things right. And we can trust him to do that.
Absolutely.
So that's a little bit of me. Feel free to come chat. There's infinitely more to say, and I like saying it. So please come ask questions. I'm more than happy to share.
And yo, this is my first time hearing this story, and holy crap, man! Like, oh my gosh. I don't want to go in a spiel because we are already going a little bit long here, so I'll try to keep my thoughts short. So I'll cut down my 5 things to just 2 things. Because Lord knows I've got some points here. We'll just cover what I first noticed in the beginning of your story with Blake, right? Everyone needs a Blake. I've got a Blake, and his name's Gabriel Hajar. So Gabe, if you're watching this, thank you. I know I keep thanking you, but I'm doing it again. Thank you, because without Gabe, I wouldn't be who I am or where I am, or even have the drive to do what I'm doing as far as living normally today. So thank you. And then for those that don't have a Blake in their life, who don't have a Gabriel Hajar in their life, who don't have somebody who unconditionally loves and looks to pour into just without cease.
Yeah.
That is your opportunity to become that person for somebody. Which leads into my next point. God can use whoever he wants to show his glory. He used me, somebody who was just always at war with something, whether it be myself, my family, or other people, always fighting. And now I fight for people. Or somebody like you, Josh, who has had quite an adventure. And now he's using you to reach so many people bajillions of miles away and planting seeds for them to then go and do that. That's the importance of doing this as well. it doesn't stop when you bless or when you pour into somebody else. They're going to pour into somebody else after that. And then they're going to pour into somebody else after that. That's just how the love of God works. It's a ripple. It spreads. It spreads.
Sort of like the Roni.
Just like the Roni, but like, you know, something that you actually
better.
catch. Yeah. Don't wear a mask for the love of God.
Wow, that'll preach.
Yeah, right? All those guys out there that are not wearing masks, they're trying to catch the love of Jesus.
Wear your masks.
Please wear your masks. That was a joke. But yeah, enough of this goof in here. Thank you for watching. This was awesome to be able to listen and chill and hang out. I need to stop saying as well. I'm practicing.
You're good, man.
Yeah.
It's natural.
It is natural, which is why I need to fix it. Next time on the Watcast, we are going to have a special guest or guests to continue talking about just exactly what the heck story is and what it means. So tune in next week, and we might be in a new setting. So that'll be cool. We're still in the baby steps of like everything. So
we got big dreams.
Big dreams and big plans and
small
actual
pockets.
Yeah, small pockets, but we got a plan and a means of getting those things done. So if things start changing in the next couple of episodes, for the better, of course.
Yeah, it's not just gonna get bad.
Yeah, like I'm not just gonna
Hopefully.
like up and leave. Anyway,
That'd be sad.
That'd be so bad. Anyway, goodbye. So, see ya.
Ciao, man.